of time and for those that already joined. So we're starting. Yeah, I think it's recording already. Yep.
All right. Very welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time today's afternoon and spending some time with us. And we'll talk some UiPath technology, and I hope to keep it as interactive as possible. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, and you can choose to wait until the end, or you just jump right in. Okay, feel free to do that. This is a kind of an open forum. We'll share what we have learned, what's coming out there in the from the UiPath latest releases, and we'll share our knowledge. Just keep it as a community driven event. All right. So I have my co-host here, Russell. He is an MVP for 2023, and he is also an AI ambassador for this year. So first of all, this is our first event since all those announcements. So congratulations, Russell. And I also have Sharon also here, and thanks for joining,
Yeah.
Sharon. Sharon is another MVP for this year, and she is also an AI ambassador.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
uh, it's really great to have both of you folks here. Myself, Pradeep Shukla, I am an MVP for this year. I was an MVP for last year as well. I mostly work on UiPath platform all across. So and nothing anything specific about it, but I work through different platforms, different product areas. My primary focus is primarily the integration, where I work with UiPath integration with various other software platforms. So there's ServiceNow, AWS products and services, and AIML is obviously right now a hot topic. So I'm trying to get in that area as well. All right, so that's a bit of about us. Let's get into that South California chapter. So this event is hosted.
Sorry, are you advancing your screen, Pradeep?
Sorry about that. What was the question?
The screen is still in the title page. So,
Yes. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, I'm changing that.
okay. Yeah.
Um, okay. There you go. All right. So this is so we'll go through a few things. We'll just walk through. Why do we still have Studio Web introduction? I'll see. Last minute changes. Anyways, so we'll talk about South California chapter. So this chapter is we founded last year, and just it's not specific to this particular area itself. We are we host our event in that time zone, but it's open for everyone. Like folks have joined from Brazil and other parts of the country, so everyone is welcome. uh, our goal is primarily to focus on building out knowledge bases, focused on some of the customers in the SoCal area. We had few customers from media companies and from other areas, so that's actually what transpired of setting up this chapter as such. Do you want to add anything, Russell, on that?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I think essentially, so as you mentioned, it's not only for SoCal, but we also have a lots of members who are joining in. Anything related to iPath, so everyone is interested, the community is interested, so we're taking everyone in. So
All right. So let's move on to the next slide. This is two of us. We have already introduced.
mm,
Diana is the community manager. She could not join today in this event, but usually she is very active and always here to support us. All right. So given that, let's jump right into our topic for today's session. So we'll talk about document understanding and some of the latest features that came out recently. And these features have been kind of staggering features that they have been getting released from last year's around September timeframe. So I saw some of these features coming in even 22.10 release, and then slowly they kept adding one on top of another. and eventually we had most of these are available as general availability on 23.4. So in case if our audience is not aware of it, what I am actually referring to those versions at 22.10 or 23.4, they are actually long-term support versions. So UiPath has two releases every year, one in April timeframe, another in somewhere around October timeframe. Those are long-term support in a sense. The products are given support for up to 2 to 3 years, and they get tested much thoroughly in order to uh, make them enterprise ready. So if you are working with an enterprise customer, or you are yourself an employee with an enterprise company, then I'm sure you would be using one of the LTS versions, and that's always recommended, right? Any version that comes in between, uh, they are supposed to be more in terms of exploratory, because sometimes a lot of features they are in public preview, but they are still not at that enterprise level. So that's a little bit about that version number what I was referring to. um, so we'll cover some of the things. Document understanding framework template. So if you use, so Studio is primarily your end goal, right? Means document understanding is where you'll build your model, your classification, your taxonomy, you'll build. But in the end, when you're trying to consume all of that information, you'll be using Studio, and that's where one of the latest templates available specifically focused for document understanding that actually helps build out a lot of framework level components readily available. So it helps us in terms of we don't have to build everything from scratch. Now that we have a template, we can just directly start using it. Compare that template to something similar to what we have like RE framework, right? So if you are building an OLTP transactional based automation, uh, you will always prefer to use RE framework. So same way, DU framework template is comparable to that. If you're building automation that involves document understanding, it's recommended to go that way. All right. Next topic, we'll talk about field level rules in Taxonomy Manager. That's very exciting. This, I think, the initial preview came somewhere around, I think in March, not March, I believe in February. Initially, it came out as a public preview, and then in 23.4 we had the full release. So we'll look at a demo just after this in few minutes, and we'll talk about how the mathematical rules you can define at a field level. What it does, it also actually helps us out in terms of defining the confidence at the field level. So earlier, what used to happen whenever we are doing a data extraction from a document, we usually had the confidence score, a cumulative score across all the fields or data elements on a particular document that we are extracting. But now it's much more granular, and you have the confidence score defined at the field level. And with the rules, you can actually uh, have a different classification for each field in terms of defining whether you accept that result or not. So for example, let's say if you're reading through name field, right? And you can define that you will the threshold for that field to be a successful extraction is 90%. Okay. At the same time, the next field may be address or zip code, and it's a numeric number. You can define the confidence score or the threshold for it. You can define at 85%. So for each field, you can define those, and also you can have additional rules to it. So that gives you much more control and power in terms of how you work through those fields through that taxonomy manager. Next item is enhanced validation experience. So this has been going on back and forth a lot because uh, we had the validation station in document understanding, but it has some limitations in terms of how you validate and what you validate. So there was a lot of feedback. I provided some feedback on that too sometime back last year. it has been in work. So now we have much more enhanced version to it. Actually, there are multiple. There are two or three different views of it, so that really helps in terms of building that out. And then the next one is one click classification. So one click classification is the latest one, I would say, in 23.4 that came out. It's pretty exciting in terms of what it can do for us. So that being said, I'll hand it over to Russell to go over the demo and show us what these new features are and how they work out. Russell, over to you.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, and then we'll make this very short and very exciting and also very interactive. And we'll try to cover most or all of the things that Pradeep has mentioned. Of course, if you have time. So let me quickly share my screen just to start going. Hold on. Entire screen. I hope you can see my screen right about now.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay. So the best logical entry point for our discussion today would be the DU framework, right? Although, as Pradeep mentioned, the DU framework template has been here for a while, for a couple of major versions now. But what I'm going to show you is some of the latest updates on the DU framework template in Studio, right? But before I
Rus
even get to
Russell,
that, here's
why don't you start from if someone is really starting from the first time he's trying to build a DU, where can you find that template and how do I, can you just
right,
show
right,
that?
right, exactly. But first, let so who here is familiar with DU framework? Not the template, but DU framework. Is there a way to raise hand here? Can you put in the chat if you're familiar with DU framework? What are the steps involved so that I can cover that in 2 to 3 minutes, just in case. DU framework, anyone? Rings a bell?
I would say go over it. There are a couple of folks who are
Okay,
aware of it, I think,
okay.
but let's do a
Good, good. Yep.
quick
Just
overview,
a
okay?
quick one. So this is one of the slides I used in the past to go over what the framework is, which is essentially a an like sequential steps in order for you to uh, the journey that a document takes from digitizing up to being able to extract a usable content after out of the document and then process that particular data or content into the downstream process. So you have an upstream process where you intake the data from, let's say, email folders, and then you have the DU, which actually um, feeds from those data. And in the DU, you have this particular framework where that particular document is being taken into. First off is loading taxonomy, because basically loading taxonomy is defining the setting the stage, right? This is not yet doing or instructing how and where to extract, but this is just defining the metadata of the documents that you're planning to extract from. Let's say you have invoice. In invoice, what are the fields? So this is just defining the metadata, right? Or the setting up the scene for the next stage. And then you have the next step, which is to digitize, which is basically a fancy term for OCR, right? OCR are used to, let's say, from an image, to convert it into a raw text, which is readable by a machine, right? Um, and OCR is not always being used because sometimes PDF are in native PDF format. So basically the text can be highlighted and copied directly. So in those cases, the digitize doesn't use the OCR. OCR is only used for those image or scan document. So that's digitized. So you have the raw text output, and of course the DOM, which basically tells you at which part those words are and the word tokens are, right? Then this is an optional step. If you have multiple types of document that you want to process in the DO framework, you have to have this classify for you to classify uh, what type of document is currently being processed, right? In fact, if you have a multi-page document, or what we call packet, right, which has multiple pages, let's say one PDF document contains 10 pages, and each of those pages has different document type, or maybe first two pages is an invoice, next is purchase order. So you may want to use classify so that only relevant pages will be fed to the proper extractor, which is the next part, which is basically using different approach. If it's structured, then mostly you would want to approach it in rule based with this the different types of extractor. If it's on the semi-structured to unstructured type of document, uh, you would want to have a more intelligent or more um, complex way of doing the extraction, so that one example is using the pre-trained models that you have in AI Center for document understanding. You have for invoice, receipts, passports, and all that. So this is suitable for semi-structured and even unstructured document because it does not rely heavily on the let's say fixed format. So machine learning model works well in high diversity scenarios like invoices, right? So you can have from 100 different formats of invoices to thousands or even infinite number of format of invoices, right? So you cannot afford to to create a form-based extractor for each of those different formats. So that's why the best approach for documents that are of semi-structured format is our machine learning models that are pre-trained with a variety of samples of document, right? So those are the two main types of extractor. It's either rule-based extractor or model-based for semi-structured and unstructured document, right? Um, and you can combine this in the framework, right? So that you have a fallback. Let's say for invoice, for some of the fields you use for let's say for invoice number in the invoice you use a regex based extractor where you create patterns. Let's say in most of your invoice you have the invoice number starts with five numeric characters and ends with INV, for example. So you can create a regex based extractor out of that. And all the remaining fields, you just use the machine learning model that was pre-trained for invoice. Right? You don't have to define any patterns. You don't have to build a form extractor because the machine learning model for invoices is already pre-trained with thousands of invoices. So even if those that it has not seen during the training, it will be able to generalize and adapt since that's how machine learning models work, right? It is able to create its own pattern. So this is the meat of the DU framework. That's why I spent some time in pointing this in covering this, and eventually some will be pushed as a fallout because of low confidence and classification and extraction. So that's why there's a facility where the human can be involved and intervene in those as needed, right? Whether it's validating classification. So this is the classification validation, right? Where you can split multiple pages on one document and assign different document types, right? And validate and also have that as a retraining loop to retrain your classifier. And similarly, you have the validation for the extraction for let's say for certain confidence fields. You can retrain uh, the extractor that you use. Although mostly this is for machine learning based extractor, um, because for form extractor or rule based extractor, you just need to update your template, right? Because for form extractor it's just like for fixed format document for structured, so you really just have to edit your template if you have changes on the format of your document. So mainly this retrain, so the retrain for structured document or for form extractor would be mainly updating the template. But what this retrain from the human in the loop would be mainly for machine learning model based extractor. Okay, so that's what I have here. So that's essentially the whole DU framework. For those who are not that familiar with, and previously, when you don't have the template, when the template is not out yet, so you have to do this actually from scratch, right? So let's say you create a sequence, and you have to manually like um, add each of the different steps, just like so, like load taxonomy, digitize document. It's the next step, classify document scope, and then you have the classifiers, intelligent keyword classifier, and then um,
You can define the
and then the
MLQs,
instructor and
import it.
all those. So you have to do it manually and set it up, right? Um,
Exactly. Yep.
but now with the DU framework, as Pradeep mentioned, it's like an RE framework for DU, right? You feed the document, and the document goes through each of the different steps in the framework, and the output will be the extraction results, validated extraction results, whether it's in export Excel, or whether you push it into a queue for downstream processing for the next performer, let's say, right? So this is how you go into this is you just open Studio, right? And then there's a document understanding process here, and it's just a matter of creating from this particular um, template. So this
Yeah.
is the
And
DU.
in some cases, if it doesn't show up on the top three or top 10, when you're
Mhm.
looking at the right hand side, new templates, right? You can always click on more, and you can
Yep, yep,
find out there is ton of templates, reusable templates are available. So this template is
right,
just nothing but a packaged format of a predefined solution design that you can just readily pick up and get to go. The major benefit that comes out of it, uh, same as RE framework, right? You have built-in exception handling, logging, uh, are already part of it. So that way you do not have to, first of all, you don't have to recreate every time. And second, you don't leave it to a chance that something you missed out or something is not taken care of. So go ahead,
right,
please.
right. Yeah. So this is just a refresher. So we haven't yet gone to the best bits yet, because what we want to cover here is, given that you have the template, what are the latest productivity features that has the latest version, right? And you also get to have the user guide here, supposed to be user guide here in this folder, which looks like this. And as you can see, there are a couple of features in this latest revision of this template, which I will cover in a bit. The testing piece, right? The test cases, right? But let me just like show you how you can utilize it in its most basic form. How you can um, tailor fit it use case, let's say, right? Especially for those that it's the first time seeing this template yet. So um, personal level, right? You can see when you create the template, two main. One is the main action center, and another is main attended. So what's the difference, right? Both are mains. If you are going for an unattended process background, that you want to execute this as a unattended process, so you would go for main action center, right? So you can either feed this process using queues, a queue trigger, meaning you have a document queue where all the queue document references or items were pushed into the queue, so that if an item is pushed into the queue, so this process will be queue triggered, right? And then ingest whatever item is added to that queue obviously the item that we should add is a document, so it will be fed into this document sending process, starting from digitization, classification, and then processing each classified section and feeding it each into its own extractor, like so, right? So that's similarly, you have main attended here. If you want this to be deployed as a attended bot that the user can trigger from UiPath Assistant, right? So you deploy or when you publish this, you will choose this as main SAML. So that's why if you can see, can you see the green arrow here?
Yeah.
You can see the green arrow here. So that means these are entry points, meaning if you publish it on the orchestrator, you can choose this, any of this as your entry point, meaning the process that you created, this will be the one that will be triggered if the process was run, for example. So you can select either of these. But the one that are in bold right here, so this is the default entry point, and the ones that are additionally green are the other entry points that you can choose when you create the process that you publish into Orchestrator. So the only difference between main, attended, and action center is this um, validation part, whether it's classification um, or the extraction, right? So in main action center, it pushes the it pushes the validation into obviously action center, just like this one, right? So that in the background, let's say, or in at the own at an own humans at own face at your own face, you can validate and you can have multiple documents to validate. So that's the main action center. So the validation are pushed into action center, while for main attended, so let me just run this right now. In main attended, there's since this is attended, you don't have to specify the target file, right? Or you can specify the target file. You can either, because if you don't specify the target file, it will ask you anyway since this is attended. So if I run this file and I don't have any target file specified when I run this, either from Assistant or Studio, right? It will ask me, hold on, what's that? Let me just, okay. That's the workflow analyzer. Okay, so for the attended, if I run this, right, it will ask me for the file I want to process, and it will pop this up, and I'll choose this one, and it will go through each of the step that I shared you with this loading the taxonomy that I defined, digitizing, classifying, extracting, and then the validate part will pop up on my screen since this is attended, right? So this is the bot is installed in the human's desktop, right? So it will digitize, classify, and then extract, and then since the auto extraction is false, it will pop this um, dialog, right? So this is attended validation, while the one in Action Center is the one that is human in the loop, which is for unattended process. But the framework components, if you notice, all of the framework components, like the digitize, the initialize, they are both using the same, right? Main Action Center is main unattended, both are using the same or pointing to the framework components, right? So those are the difference, right? If you want to do attended, so you choose the main attended. If you want to do Unattended with human in the loop, you do main action center, right? So that's the first thing. Um, Next thing is, before we go to the other features in the validation station, next thing, how do you configure this for your particular use case? Let's say you want to have an invoice processing by unattended mode, right? Of course, first you need to define the taxonomy. So taxonomy, this, if you create the template from the template, it already has predefined document types that you can reuse or just leverage if the document that you're processing is the doc if the documents that you're processing is already part of this, so you don't have to create, right? But if you are planning to extract from a completely new document type, so that's the time that you create the taxonomy. In this case, invoice is already here, right? So you don't have to create the taxonomy of the invoice, so it's already there, right? um so that's um updating the taxonomy based on the type of document that you're processing. And what else you want to modify or customize is, if you're planning to use other OCR engine like Google, for which is, if you have handwritten documents, let's say, so this is what you want to update. But as default, it already uses the UiPath document OCR, and you just API key in the folder level in the assets in orchestrator where that bot is connected to, right? So this API
And
key in
then this
config.
this API key is coming from the document understanding licenses
Correct.
or number of the package
Correct.
that you have procured.
Correct.
If you're using community edition, you may have a limited number of units over there, but that's what the API key Russell is referring
Correct.
to.
And this API key is used throughout the different framework components: digitize,
Right.
extractor, classify. So this is very important. So you have to get your API key from your own org or orchestrator that you're connected to in the admin, right? In the admin, you have the robots, the licenses, and robots and services here, and you can copy the API key from here,
Document
right?
understanding, yeah, that's the one. Yes.
So
So can you also
and
briefly talk about, Russell, in terms of the different OCRs? What what is best? Have in your experience, do you see which one
mm,
is better than the other? There are few like UiPath OCR is there. There is one from Microsoft. There is
for
one
sure,
from Tesseract, right? And there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
Google as
absolutely. So I think for most of the use cases that we've deployed, so we just use the default UiPath document OCR because this is continuously being improved and making optimal for document processing types of use cases, right? So this is the one that's
yeah.
already here. And if you're working especially on let's say documents with tables, right?
Yeah,
So
the invoices
from,
mostly in
yeah,
invoices they have tabular
right.
data.
Right. So, not only invoices but also purchase orders
Sure.
or maybe
Yeah.
some healthcare
Mhm.
document. So this is really something that you wanna try out or use. But so that's one thing, one tip. And another tip is, if you have a document that has handwritten, so I also touched a bit earlier, you might want to consider using Google Cloud Vision OCR,
Yeah.
right? I think this really um, converts the handwritten text much more accurately than
Much
the
better.
other
Yeah.
OCRs here,
Yeah,
right?
that's my experience too. I have used there's a Microsoft Vision API
Mm-hmm.
for handwritten text. I go between Google and the Microsoft Vision API. So
Right,
yeah,
right,
those are some of the alternate. And
yep,
depending on the use case, right? You always have to look at what is the success or that you're getting at, how accurate your extraction is. But
Correct.
in
Correct.
most of the cases, I think UiPath document OCR has come a long way. I think
Right.
if you compare it with last uh, 2 years back, then it has definitely come up a long way from there.
Right. Right. Exactly. So yeah, if you really want accuracy versus speed, if you wanna prioritize accuracy versus speed, then definitely you wanna look at this like bigger OCRs or cloud OCRs, or even just UiPath document OCR. But if you are more considering more weight on the speed rather than accuracy because you think your document is well, you have a quality documents, right? A well laid out document, well scanned documents, let's say, then you may also consider lightweight OCRs such as OmniPage, which is in different bundle, in different in the package here. So you have OmniPage and other local OCRs like I think Microsoft Tesseract has local OCR as well. So yeah, so you have lightweight OCRs available as well for you to use in the digitize, right? And again, another consideration is the API, the consumption, right? Although this uses API key or this references API key, it doesn't really consume document sending units, right? So that's one thing to remember, right? You provide an API key for document UiPath document OCR, but it doesn't consume any document sending units, right? The main thing that consumes the document sending units are the extractors, which we'll go on to later, right? And of
The
course, if
pages,
you're
yeah,
using Google Cloud, yep, if you are using Google Cloud OCR, then that's another consumption in the GCP
yeah,
Google Cloud platform. If you're using Azure Cloud OCR, then it's in the Azure. But if you're using the other lightweight OCRs that I mentioned, like OmniPage, Tesseract, so this doesn't ask for any API key. So these are yeah. So but again, these are less relatively lesser accuracy, but much faster. So yeah, those are the main considerations. And of course, it also has pre-defined classification right here, which you can just update the intelligent keyword classifier. In this case, I use the machine learning classifier um, that I trained using the one-click classification that I'll cover in a bit, right? For to recognize an invoice from a PO or other document type from which document type, and you can configure which classifier would you use to identify, let's say, invoice, which classifier would you use to identify purchase order. So that's the classification step here, so that in case you feed something that's not an invoice here, so it will classify as other document type and won't process using the invoice extractor. So that's the purpose of the classify. And then you go into the main piece, which is the extractor, right? So the reason why this is in for each is because if you have a multi-page document, it will be able to multi-page document into different section, right? And each section will be fed appropriately into the proper extractor that you have here. So you can have multiple extractor here. For example, not only invoice. In this case, I'm only doing invoice, but let's say you have different types of document here. Let's say you have a W9 and you create a form. So you create a template for this. W9, we create a template. So W9, I don't have to use a ML extractor because this is a fixed format document. So I can just create a template, upload my sample, and then create
hmm
a template. Let's say you have another machine learning extractor, but not for invoice, but for other, um, let's say PO. I think PO that UiPath. So you have these different endpoints in, I think something like this. This would be in the documentation, which we can link after this. But or if you have custom trained machine learning model for extraction, you can add it here, right? So similarly, you can define which extractor you want to use for different document types. So if you receive a purchase order, so this will be processed or extracted by the purchase order extractor. If you receive a W9, so this will be processed by your form extractor. And this is just a way to map the different taxonomy or document type into different extractor. And also you can do like, for example, for invoice, right? I also created a form extractor, but at the same time, my fallback would be invoice and extractor. So this is what we call hybrid. Like for some of these fields, I wanna extract using form extractor, and with certain confidence threshold. Let's say if the form extractor um, has less than 30% confidence, let's say for payee, for example, then it will fall back to the next extractor, which is invoice extractor that I defined. So you can set those threshold and make your extraction really more robust. Okay, so that's just quickly covering that piece, which is basically um, uh, even without the template you can do with this different components, and that's how you customize it as per your need. So again, just a recap: you define the taxonomy, update the taxonomy, you choose your OCR for digitization. Then if you need to, you can add classifier, but if you are only processing one type of document, you can just bypass this, right? This classification step, and then go directly to the process in the extractor, right? And then this is the most important piece: extractor. You define which type of extractor you want to use for your um, documents, right? Um, so that part. So we just covered the bit of a refresher. Sorry if that take too long on the framework side. But what are really what in the latest version of the of DU, right? Of the DU package that you can see here, document sanding. What are the main productivity features that was released, right? So let's first look at the action center, right? The validation, whether it's validation from action center or validation from uh, from local for attended. So one thing is so enhanced validation experience. Previously, you don't have this like confidence score.
Yeah.
So when it comes to confidence score, it's either OCR confidence score, how confident the OCR is digitizing specific parts of the document, right? Another thing is the extraction confidence score. So you would have different, let's say, let's look at the payee. In terms of OCR, it's 100% sure that the UiPath document OCR was able to convert this into raw text, right? Sirius Cybernetics Corp, it's 100% sure that it was able to convert this properly, right? So that's the OCR confidence score. For the extraction, this is where the machine learning model confidence is. For this, in this case, I use the pre-trained invoice model. So the model is 93% confident that it has pointed the proper payee or vendor, right? Whether the vendor is in here, whether the vendor is in here, or sometimes the vendor is like the logo somewhere here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's saying it's 93% confidence that it has pointed to the proper vendor properly, right? So that's the extraction confidence score, and this is just one. I think from the last major version, you can be able to like, so it has like section here, fields to validate and valid fields, right? So you can um, reset the confidence score so that filter out what needs to be validated based on the threshold, confidence threshold that you set for extraction or OCR. right? So that's one thing. Um, and another thing is, if you notice this one, so I think this is one of the what we call the field level rules, um, that you define at a taxonomy level. So just to give you a quick background on why this is important, previously without this taxonomy level field rules, which I can quickly show you, if you go to a specific document and specific field, you have these rules, right? So previously you don't have this, um, um,
You can
and
only do a string validation or something like that, very broad level, whether it's a text or alphanumeric, but you could not put validation rules.
right, right.
And that's what
So
it
this, yep,
enhanced
correct. So
it
this is
completely.
consolidating the centralizing the way you create rules for your different fields in the taxonomy manager, which is which makes sense because previously, let's say you want to make sure that the payee is a mandatory field, let's say, right? So I define these rules that they should not be empty, right? So when it comes to action center in here, right? If the payee is, let's say, empty, for example, I won't be able to submit this because this is a um,
Mandatory field,
uh,
yeah.
must. This is a must.
Yeah.
So if it's a must and it's not, let's say, satisfying this particular rule, then I won't be able to submit this. So I have to have something in here, right?
Guys, can
So
I make a question?
sure, sure, sure.
This is on Action Center, so this is in cloud, correct? This vision here. Yeah.
Yes, although you also have an action center on prem, but yeah, you have to upgrade your
Uh-huh.
on
So
action
if
center.
I am using an old version of document understanding, let's say 2022, you know,
Uh-huh.
and
Hmm.
my taxonomy doesn't have this rules capability that you just showed, uh,
Correct.
will this work in Action Center, or I need to?
Um, I think this is tied to the intelligent OCR package. Hold on. This
Your
is not
validation,
really
so
center version.
your validation station still is going to be loaded in the action center, but you would not have all these new features that came out.
Ah,
So are you
okay.
using 22.4 or 22.10?
Dot four.
Dot 4. It's not
Okay.
that old, but you
Yeah.
won't have these new features that just came out in last
Right.
release and this one. But you
And
would have the
yeah,
validation station. You definitely have the
correct.
validation station to do it.
Yeah. And
Okay.
maybe just to clarify that on that a bit, this features okay, so this one is not really on the action center version, let's say. This is tied to the intelligent OCR
The
activities
OCR package. Okay, okay.
Ah,
package
okay.
and the
But even
uh,
then, right? You
persistence.
may have some, but the rule field level validation is not there. You
Yeah,
still
rule field
cannot do that.
is I think it's in the I can tell if it's in the studio version or yeah, you can actually. Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, this is also intelligent OCR,
Yeah.
6.7 and up. The rules. So you can try updating your intelligent OCR activities to 6.7 and up, and then you can see in your taxonomy manager. You can see this rules.
Okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. I
Thank you.
think yeah. I think I tested that previously. So yeah, it's in the intelligent OCR as well. But so let's get some background on before how you do it, right? So before how you do it without the taxonomy level field rules is you would go in the config, and it's still here anyway since this is in the framework, right? In the framework, you would be able to set the hold on, it's opening. There's a config level um, configuration, right? Let's say you have an invoice, you have receipt, you have PO, so you have different configuration here. Previously, this is how we can identify or we can map the mandatory fields and the confidence fields, right? Um, when you create a process out of the framework template, so you have this in the config file, and then you define here which are the mandatory. But again, this is limited to mandatory and confidence checks or
Yeah.
rules. If you want to check, let's say, regex validation for certain fields, or if a value of certain fields starts with something and ends with something, you cannot do it this way, right? But on the level rules in the taxonomy manager, you can now do it. And also even the mathematical rules that you have here, because in here, although these are just logs, the mathematical rules, maybe just, sorry, I take too much time here, but I get really excited when showing this different um, features. So in the after extraction, so you have this extraction business rules validation. So this is part of the DO framework template, which actually uses the config file and checks the different mandatory fields and confidence fields. This is part of the SAML that comes in as part of the DO framework template, and this is looking at the config file that you've set. And then so this one is the one that I added. I'll discuss that later, but essentially this is how it's checking the mandatory fields that I mentioned. So mandatory fields are basically a list of fields that are taken from this. That's if it's receipt, so these are the mandatory field, and this is already pre-built. Let's say for invoice, for receipt, you have this samples, right? It just looks at the config file and checks the different mandatory field, which I commented out in this particular sample, and also the confidence field. So this is already pre-built here. So what I did, since I'm doing the field level rules in Taxonomy Manager, I just added this one, right? So basically, in order for me to get the result of the rules, right, from the taxonomy manager. So I just iterate over the business rules result in the after extraction. So from the business rules result, I can be able to find what are the rules that have been broken at the field level. So whether it's mandatory field check for, let's say, for this one, this is a mandatory field check. This should always have value. So that's how I define this. But for, let's say, for, I think for some, you can add multiple fields here, but yeah, like for this one, I also I'm checking the format of the amount. It should not have the dollar, or it should not have the comma. So I put regex here. So these are the rules that I'm checking when I loop over this business rules result, and I'm getting the list of field rules from the extraction. So that's where I will be able to identify if I need to show um, if I need to show action center or validation station or not, right? So instead of looking at this config file, which comes with the DO framework template, I just define the rules within taxonomy manager, which again makes sense, right? And because it's much more flexible for me than using this config file, right? So that's one big update, I think. And also, once it's in Action Center, you won't be able to submit if it's a must validation field. Um, So that's really important there. Okay. Um. Okay.
That's
So
good,
maybe.
Russell.
Yep. Sorry. Just sorry.
Go ahead with your question.
Time, time passed by. So is there any question? I think we have still a. Uh,
Samuel, you had a question, I believe. Go ahead.
Uh, no, no, don't have any
Okay.
question. No,
All
I was
right.
just wondering if this new feature, is much more easier to include your business rules now than before.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, so it does make sense if you do a lot of work on document understanding, it definitely makes sense to upgrade. And yeah, so these products are evolving, right? So there are a lot of features that are coming up almost with every release, and they are trying to take away most of the work that we have to do manually or set up configurations. Those things can also be pulled out. Uh, so I know we have Russell had really great walkthrough here. I'm sure we can do one of these again. If the community wants it, we'll set up one more session with talking about the studio template itself. I think there are a ton of question
Right.
might
Yeah.
be over there with the users. So let's quickly wrap up. We only have 2 minutes. I have few more things to cover up.
Yeah. Sure.
I
Sure.
won't take too much time, but
Mm-hmm.
respecting everyone's time, let's
Yep.
finish what we have to share. All right. So, Russell, if you stop
Yep.
sharing, I'll just
Yep.
quickly get back
I'll
to it.
stop there. Yep.
Thanks again for this. That was really very thorough overview. All right. So let me know if you guys see my screen back. All right. So we were Oh, that was great. So let's talk about three more things I want to talk about, and I'm not going to take too much time. I had a demo prepared for it, but I think we'll do it later again next time. Okay. All right. So there are three things that I wanted to talk here. I'll come back later. Sorry about that. My son, he's home today. So there are three things we want to talk about. So a pre-trained classification model that was released. There was staggered release, like I mentioned, right? There are a few trained models were released a little earlier, but now we have a lot more. And I'll show you uh, where you can find more about these. We don't have time to talk about in detail of these, but I'll definitely show you where you can find. So let me see if you can see this. All right. Can you guys see that? So this is where we have all our new packages coming up. So if you go back here, look at this documentation page, document understanding for automation cloud. So can you guys see the screen, the page that I'm sharing right now? I don't see it
Yep.
here.
Yes.
You can see it. Yep.
Okay. All right. It was not showing on my preview screen. Okay. So what we have here, so these are the out of the box pre-trained model, right? So now, like what Russell was referring to, right? That there's a W9 form if you have to do extraction on W9. So you have to create a model for it. But now you have already some of these standardized forms like 1040. This is your taxation form. 4506T, I don't know what this is, but these are the standard forms, right? And similarly, looking at generic bank statements, bill of landing, BOL, checks, they have standardized, even though every bank or every institution has a little difference in formatting, but all in all, they are still very much standard. So these packages can actually reduce our work a lot more. Almost 50% of work is already done because you have these pre-built packages. You can directly just, and W9 is a W9, W2, these are already included, including utility bills, vehicle title. So these packages that just came out with this release, and some of them were available a little bit early, I think in 23.2 also. So these packages, once we ingest these packages, we just have to supply the input documents, right? And then you have your extraction available. Obviously, you may have to tweak few things in terms of what threshold you want to define for them. But other than that, actually performs most of your work. And if you're working on any of these standard areas, that's a ready to use automation model for you. So you'll find these packages in the AI Center, and also these are available on Studio Web. And that's another latest update, that now you can even build some of these document extraction activities directly on Studio Web. So that actually empowers your citizen developer, because now they don't need to really understand. I'll come back, please. Give me 10 minutes, all right? So we don't have to spend any more time, or citizen developers don't have to know really the machine learning model and how they define the classifications, because they can pick up one of these standardized out of the box model, and they can directly use it from Studio Web itself. So that takes away a lot of uh, technology level, I would say, limitation for citizen developers to work on it. So that's really empowering for them. On the same lines, we have digitization service. This was launched in September last year, but this is still in public preview, so this is not available on as a G as a GA. But this is also going in the same direction, where you can have readily available API. So you can directly consume that API through applications. And those applications doesn't have to be a UiPath application. That's where the integration services come in. You can even directly consume this with whether you are building a .NET application, Java-based application, or any other platform for that matter, right? You can directly ingest a document, and you can get your extraction out of that through the digitization service. I think that's where we'll see a lot of scale in terms of how we can really go to the next level of using UiPath document understanding. Uh, Last but not least, I'll talk about briefly on this. So this is not something that is kind of is not reflected for the end user, but what have happened in 23.4, all these out of the box models that I was sharing earlier, and I'll post the link also in the chat. Uh, all these models are actually now built on layout LM model. So what that does, it uses transformer based architecture, and that's primarily to support the scalability, because that's where UiPath is actually looking at, primarily building document understanding and AI center as independent services. So they are, even though they are part of the UiPath platform or the ecosystem, whichever way you want to refer to it, but it's not just limited to that, right? There is use case and there is potential applicability out of that too. So out of that, your standard applications or even your external third-party applications. Uh, think about ServiceNow, right? ServiceNow has a lot of tickets, purchase orders, invoices directly in ServiceNow, right? So why do you really have to bring in those documents or those outputs out of ServiceNow and then process it, right? If you have an API from UiPath, you can directly ingest. Yeah, go on. So you can directly ingest that in ServiceNow, and that way you can have your data extraction done right then and there without leaving the platform. Okay, so that's all that I had to share, and I there is a lot more coming up. 23.4, we are still exploring some of the additional features, and it's pretty exciting I have seen, and what's also on the roadmap. So that being said, we'll wrap up our today's session, and I really thank everyone for joining and spending their late evening with us. These are some of the upcoming events that we have. For next month, we are meeting on OpenAI GPT integration. By the time in June, we'll have another Q&A type of session we are thinking, where we'll just open it up for all our audiences to come in and just ask questions, right? It's not just one-way conversation where we are telling what we have to share, but we want to hear more from our audiences and be able to answer those questions. Uh, follow up with that in August timeframe. We'll bring more use cases on AI Center side. All right. So that's all that we have right now on calendar, and based on the interest and based on community feedback, we'll create more. And if you guys are interested on a certain topic, feel free to let us know, because that will help us build our schedule that way, and we can prioritize one of those use cases that you guys can share with us, or we can add that one of the other events down the line. All right. So that's all that I had to share. Russell, any closing remarks?
No, yeah, this is perfect. Thanks for giving an overview of the next upcoming events that we have. So, yep, hope this
All right
session
then.
is insightful for everyone.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again, and please go ahead and sign up for the next sessions, and we'll be glad to see you again in the next session. All
Thank
right.
you,
Thank you
everyone.
guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
See you
See
again.
ya.
Goodbye.
Thank you.